There's a corporate media smear campaign starting against Glenn Greenwald, the journalist involved in bringing to the public, publishing the interview that kind of, and the story that broke the leaked documents of Edward Snowden regarding NSA surveillance in the United States. The corporate media smear campaign ramped up, I guess, pretty quickly. We had Congressman Peter King telling lies about Glenn Greenwald and using those lies to say that Glenn Greenwald should be arrested and prosecuted. We had some arguing that Meet the Press's David Gregory was simply playing devil's advocate and asking Glenn Greenwald if he should be arrested for aiding and abetting Edward Snowden for doing journalism. I don't know that I totally disagree that the question may have been fair in some kind of abstract sense, but the way that entire interview carried forward, I have some serious problems with. But the most interesting part is what's now developing. And Glenn Greenwald himself wrote an article yesterday or the day before, I believe it was yesterday in The Guardian, where he revealed that a bunch of corporate media outlets have been contacting him because they're working on stories clearly designed to smear him. How do we know they're designed to smear him? Well, they're investigating Glenn Greenwald's past 10 years ago and asking him about the minutia of stuff he was involved in a long time ago that is of absolutely no relevance to Edward Snowden. For example, Glenn Greenwald smartly getting out in front of this. He said he was contacted by one media outlet, and they said they were going to do a story about the fact that from 2002 to 2004, Glenn Greenwald participated. He was one member in a multi-member LLC, which had interest in a bunch of different businesses. One of those businesses was the distribution of adult videos. And Glenn Greenwald says, I haven't been involved in that company for 9 years. And by the way, just about every major hotel chain is involved in the distribution of adult videos, if you haven't noticed. That is one story. What does that have to do with Edward Snowden? And why now do we care about a partnership interest that Glenn Greenwald removed himself from 9 years ago? I don't know.
Yeah, this whole thing is very strange. You would think people would want to just focus on Snowden and on that story and on what he's doing.
His involvement there.
Right. I mean, I guess you could say that. I mean, aren't people glad that someone reached out and managed to talk to him, that we have these interviews with Snowden, that we know anything about?
A lot of corporate media seems to be very, very angry because he's not playing by the rules. The second item, a reporter obtained a document that showed an unpaid liability to the IRS that was connected to Glenn Greenwald's law practice from years ago. And again, that is something that it wasn't like he was a tax criminal. It was just that they were negotiating paying some back taxes to the IRS. How is that relevant to the Edward Snowden story, Natan?
It's not. It's not relevant. I do think that we should be careful to notice that both sides here are smearing the other side. And while it is true that a number of corporate media outlets are trying to mix in Snowden with Greenwald and to accuse Greenwald of things that maybe he had nothing to do with, like aiding and abetting Snowden's moves from country to country, I do think that if you look at the situation, there are some questions as to what Glenn Greenwald's role in all of this is. And also, you know, the fact that he's not really playing the typical objective journalist role. He's sort of, as we've said many times, an advocate for this guy and explaining his situation and justifying it.
No question about it. But again, these stories make no sense. And the third one I'll tell you about is a reporter from the Daily News contacted Glenn Greenwald, according to what Greenwald has said, asking him about a student loan judgment, which was in default over 10 years ago and is now covered by a payment plan agreement. No matter what questions Natan is asking or any of us ask about Glenn Greenwald's involvement with Edward Snowden, is student loan debt resolved 10 years ago into a payment plan part of the story? I think these are obvious attempts to unfairly smear Glenn Greenwald.
Yes, and at the same time, it's just sensationalism, right?
It is. No question about it. So be aware. I think Greenwald is doing for all the questions about his motives, is doing the right thing by getting out in front of this. On today's bonus show, we will talk about South Korea introducing the world's fastest wireless network and a lot more. DavidPakman.com/membership.
The David Pakman Show at DavidPakman.com.